Clemson comes from behind to beat West Virginia. We'll talk about it right here on Locked On Clemson.
You are Locked On Clemson, your daily podcast on the Clemson Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Tiger fans? Morgan Thomas here, Clemson fan, Clemson grad, host and producer of Locked On Clemson, part-time host and producer over on 105.5 FM The Roar. Thank you so much for making Locked On Clemson your first listen of the day. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Big salute out there to the everydayers. You know how we do it here, Monday through Friday. Exclusive Clemson content right here for you. And if you're new to the show, we'll welcome in. Hopefully you enjoy the show. If you do enjoy the show, why don't you stick with us? Hit that subscribe button so you never miss another episode. Speaking of this episode, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Tonight's show is going to be kind of a post-game show after the win against West Virginia. What this win actually means, we'll talk about it. Segment 3, Segment 2, who are the impact players and how they were able to win this game in a close one. And then we'll get started with the big story of the night. The big story of the night being that Clemson's Carter Welling had a breakout game and allowed Clemson to come back from behind. And to be honest with you, I had a lot going on. Okay. I'm just going to be fully transparent here. Was messing around with the animals. My water heater was busted. I had the plumber over late night. I had to go get dinner for everyone. And not to mention, there was a point where Clemson was down by 13 points. And my wife was saying, maybe we should just turn it to watch the rerun of the CMA awards because this is not going the way that we thought it would go. However, I still kept it on. So I moved the big TV, and you can knock me for this, but I moved the big TV to the CMAs, and then I moved the Clemson game to the iPad. All right. It happens to the best of us, right? But at the end of the day, we were able to watch and stick through something that maybe the football team hasn't been able to do, and that is come from behind and win a game. Clemson 70-67 in a game that I didn't even think would going to get past 50 points at first. Both teams play extremely slow, and at halftime, it felt as if it was just dragging along. But tonight was an early season win, but not just another early season win. It was Clemson proving that it could take a punch, and it could stay composed and finish in a close game that was going to be physical, that was going to have some problems for them. And really a game where, for the most part, there were a lot of, and we knew this going into this game, that there were a lot of role players, but no superstars. And for Clemson fans still wondering what this roster looks like, well, we still have a lot to kind of figure out and fill out as we get into December, as we get into, conference play. This is the time where we're kind of learning what this team is all about. But one thing we can kind of start to say is, hey, this team looks pretty decent under pressure so far. It's the best answer that we've had in this very early season. So I don't want to read too much into it because, it is still very young in the season, but let's start with the basics. Clemson trailed for almost 30 or 27 minutes in this game. West Virginia controlled most of the flow, especially in the second half. They got to 11-point lead at like 10 right under 11 minutes. And then, that's where you kind of felt like, all right, maybe this team not gelled very well right now with all these new pieces. Maybe they're not at home, even though it is in the state of South Carolina. But maybe this is the time where, they're going to fold. It's a neutral site game. Live to fight another day, right? But tonight, that's exactly the opposite of what happened. They didn't fold. They kept fighting through even some, frustrating drives, and they recalibrated themselves, and the entire game shifted because Carter Welling got into a situation where he kind of took the team on his back a little bit. His heroics, to me, and heroics is a good word for it, because he didn't just score 13 points and get 8 rebounds. He took over when the team needed it, when they needed anybody to do so. And, as my friends in the group chat are joking, the entire Clemson Nation is going to go out and buy headbands now. I'm going to even wear a headband when I go fly my airplane this week, in honor of Carter Welling's game tonight. When Clemson needed a basket, when they needed a rebound, they finally got it. When they needed a defender, they finally got it from Carter Welling. And it's not just, what you see on the box score. It's just his ability to kind of just play that rough, tough, just well-rounded type of player to keep the team alive. There just has to be one person willing or able to step up and take it to win the game, right? And just say, hey, I'm gonna take over from this. Now, the comeback was great because this team, as I mentioned, it was not that great to watch the game. I mean, not very good shooting from the field, pretty bad shooting from 3-point, and only 25 points in the first half. That, to me, was a death sentence. I told you I took them off the big screen. I didn't think they were worthy of the big screen. But they came out in the second half and shot much better from the field, shot much better from 3. And that's the kind of thing that makes you sit back and say, okay, maybe this team just needs to continue to work together and get more reps together, get more playing time together. Because the good thing is they adjusted. Brad Brownell teams do that really well. They scheme very well. They adjust very well. They adjusted. They didn't panic. And they found someone who could kind of step up. And it didn't have to be like massive stepping up, but just enough, right? Just enough. The team really hadn't gone through a slugfest in the games that they've won. They've kind of just out rebounded by like crazy, out turned over the other team and just won by a lot. And so they haven't really had to deal with something like this. And in the previous games, outside of the Georgetown loss, we'll say, it wasn't the same formula as what we saw tonight. Tonight was toughness. Tonight was rebounding, patience. We're going to have to be patient as fans, because this is a little bit of a slow going offense. It's going back to kind of Brad Brownell of the old, where they're in no rush to get to 80 points. They're in almost no rush to get to 50 points. Toughness, rebounding, patient offense, playing good defense, letting their best players kind of ease into it and take over in times that are needed. That's what we're going to see, or that's at least what we saw tonight. And we may see more of that from this team. But I will say there's still a lot to be kind of figured out, right? This is still very early on in the season. There's a ton that can go on between now and March. Clemson was favored in this game, but only by like 2.5. So, and I felt as if West Virginia could have very easily won the game. There were times where, their shooters were getting a little bit hot. But again, Clemson just grinded through and played some really good individual ball with a few guys that we'll talk about in segment 2, because I want to highlight specific players, because it wasn't all just Carter Welling. It was a little bit of everyone to keep them close enough, and then finally kind of get over that last part to gain the lead again and win the game. So we'll talk about those individual impact players and how Clemson ran away with the win late in this game against West Virginia, right here in segment 2 of Locked on Clemson. College football is here, and I couldn't be more excited. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands, there's just nothing like it. But let's be real, actually getting tickets that it can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices, no surprise fees. What you see is what you get. I pulled up Game Time and I'm looking at the zone deals for the Furman game, and I'm really liking them. I'm seeing like 45, 35 in some good spots. So go check it out if you want to go to the game this weekend for military appreciation. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. The individual impact from this team was amazing, but I wanted to say the individual impact for you guys out there, the listeners. Yes, those of you who make Locked On Clemson the first listen of your day, we really, really appreciate it. We want to thank you so much for being an everydayer. Also, I want to thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. As I mentioned, I love Locked On because there are just so many other teams that you can go check out with the same format or similar format, so you know exactly what you're going to get. You're going to get the best topics and the best subjects and everything and the hottest things that are going on news-wise for any team. So if you want to find out about Florida State, you can. If you want to find out about the Tar Heels, you can. Any other team out there, most of the teams out there, even in professional world, you can find it out on Locked On with the same format, easy to listen to, easy to understand. And I love to do it, as I told you, to look at the opposing team to kind of get a little bit of a hint on what's going on our rivals out there. All right, going back into the individual impact for Clemson players, though, and how Clemson walked away with the game late, we got to break it down on how Clemson flipped it and how they were able to come back from trailing most of the night. And I've got a few labels of guys, all right? So the first guy is RJ Godfrey. To me, he was the emotional anchor for this team. Godfrey was just tremendous. 14 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 steals. He played physical. We know he's going to play physical. But it's just nice to see. You got to give him props for doing what he's good at, sticking with his strengths, being very physical. When Clemson needed somebody to get there and get scrappy, he was. Think about this. Clemson had only a limited amount of second chance points, which means every single possession was war. Everything mattered. Every rebound mattered. Every possession mattered. And Godfrey won those battles more than anyone on the Clemson team. And that is why it mattered the most. His scoring is never flashy. It's never going to be. But he finished a few tough layups. He locked up his guy, and he made sure that just the team didn't go through that stall out moment where it got out of hand. They couldn't come back like it happened against Georgetown. So big props, first of all, to RJ Godfrey. As we mentioned, Carter Welling definitely up there, and I'm going to talk about him too. But RJ Godfrey, emotional anchor. That's what I put down for him. Now, the next guy I put down was Dylan Hunter. He had a good game, a pretty decent game this tonight, and he controlled what he could control. He had 13 points, 4 assists, no turnovers. He was composed on the court. He managed the pace very well. He played smart, and he didn't overcomplicate anything. He did the simple plays and executed them in a good way. If he continues to do things like that, then Clemson has a very trustworthy ball handler in late games and maybe in closer contests. Now, you haven't seen that kind of thing. You typically remember that from Chase Hunter, his brother, but he could definitely fit into that role. Now, he's still growing and developing himself, but he could fit in that role as well. And Justin Porter, he was kind of the momentum changer. He scored 14 points, hit 2 threes, and attacked when Clemson needed an attack, specifically getting a nice steal at about midcourt later on in the game. He's becoming a guy who who can help wake up the offense when they need it. When everybody else is kind of getting a little bit slow and sluggish, he can find something there. Clemson has, again, not one megastar on this team at all. They have a lot of role players. Maybe they're all role players. Maybe none of them are true megastars or stars at all, or even leaders, I would say. But if they just get a few guys to step up in critical moments to keep the game going, keep it close when they're down, keep them ahead when they're up, these kind of things are going to make moments where the game will swing into Clemson's favor or stay into Clemson's favor. So Justin Porter did well for that as well. But Johnson was kind of a surprise late. You know, he on the stat sheet for most of the night was not doing well. But then he went 2 for 4 from 3. With a lot of like late game pressure on him, was able to kind of hit some. Brownell showed that he trusted him out on the court, even off the bench, rewarded him with some shot making opportunities, and he responded the way that you were expecting from him. So, you know, outside of Carter Welling, you know, you had a lot of other guys that kind of stepped up and helped keep this game moving, keep this team moving, and, you know, had double-digit points. I mean, if you look at double-digit points, number 1, Porter had 14. Dylan Hunter, 2, had 13. Carter Welling, 13 himself, number 22. And RJ Godfrey, 14, 00. Not 00, but the single 0 is written 00 on here. And then Butta Johnson had 11. So, you know, you're talking about more than, or right at 5 guys that had double digits. And that was a big game changer, because West Virginia could not say that. You know, Clemson still is a team that, shockingly enough, has enough talent to kind of play 10 dudes. And it's very odd to say that in college basketball, especially under Brad Brownell. Many times it's been 5 guys and maybe just 1 or 2 off the bench for 7 total. But to have another, 10 guys get decent playing time and opportunities is kind of shocking that they're continuing this. Maybe I'm kind of liking it, because each person has a little bit of something that they can do to help this team continue to fight forward. Now, again, I don't want to forget about the big superstar of the night. That was Carter Welling. He kind of closed it off at the end. You know, Welling just didn't score, though, which he did hit some key 3-pointers that really mattered, but he kept Clemson in the game. He hit shots when he needed to, when they were kind of bleeding shots, but he grabbed rebounds when they needed him the most, you know? And rebounds in a tight game like this, as we mentioned, when you didn't get a lot of second chance opportunities, decided games, and decided this game, in my opinion. He looked like one of those guys that just simply was confident enough to want the ball. You know, some guys out there just don't want that kind of pressure. They want to be a role player, and that's it. And Welling seemed to show something a little bit different. Again, you're looking at a team that went from a terrible first half, 15% three-point field goal percentage, to 56%. Overall field goal percentage from the floor, 37%, and then second half, 56%. So much better overall. Whatever they did at halftime, they kind of woke up and helped them survive this game. Not only that, Welling finished 3 for 4 from free throw line. And as you know, if you're a Clemson fan at all over the years, you know for sure how important hitting clutch free throws are. And when you don't, it is not a good thing, that's for sure. They finished 15 and 19 from free throw, 78.9%, while West Virginia, 63.2%. And you think that's not a big deal, but it ended up being one of the factors of why Clemson won by 3, just 3 points. Huge, huge deal for Clemson. All right, here in segment 3, we're going to go to our final segment, and we're going to talk about a little bit more of the big picture and why this win matters so much for Clemson. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of a game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head over to FanDuel.com and sign up, and then you can go to the FanDuel app as well. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Let's talk big picture here. What does this actually mean for Clemson? They proved that they can come back. They had not really needed to or been able to show this ability and to be able to respond to adversity. They survived many different problems that were frustrating, but they survived. Tonight, they survived poor shooting in the first half. They survived foul trouble. They survived a West Virginia run in the second half, and they survived turnovers. It wasn't a perfect game by any means, but they were able to survive and fight again. Depth, to me, when you look at it, again, Clemson had 5 double-digit scorers on the team. They played 10 total players. The depth on Clemson's team is dangerous, and it is something that we expected to be, important for Clemson this season. And the fact that they had 27 bench points matched West Virginia's bench output, even though the Mountaineers needed more rotation. I will say this. I mentioned in the show yesterday that whoever's bench points had more would win the game. Well, it ended up being both teams had the same, but what really worked is those late game 3-pointers and those late game defensive stands. So overall, sometimes when two teams are very evenly matched like this, you just have to have one guy step up, and that one guy was Carter Welling. So what does this tell you about Clemson? Well, the biggest thing to me is that they can win in a way that they need to scrap by. They need to keep fighting through. And, they're not playing their greatest game in the world, but they can fight through it. So, and they can win in different ways, depending on the opponent. Now, the truth is, though, the roster probably doesn't have a full identity yet. The roster doesn't have a clear starting 5. I had somebody text me like, who are the best 5? And even from this game, I don't truly know. They have 6-7 guys that could probably be double figures. And they also have, a rotation of guys who, depending on the matchup that you're playing, should get more time or less time, all depending on the opponent. So it really just kind of depends. But that's a good thing. Brad Brownell has built a team that can be very versatile, and, it won't hurt as bad if anybody does happen to get into some bad foul trouble. And that's kind of my thing is there was nobody else. Well, I guess Zach Foster was probably the worst in foul trouble, but he really wasn't able to help the team much at all. Everybody else had no more than 2 fouls. So, when you look at it, Clemson did a really good job. And even if they do have somebody in foul trouble, they're pretty well rounded with multiple players who can step up if they need to. So I'm not as worried about that. In prior Brownell teams where they only had maybe 6 guys that you trusted out there for a longer period of time, yeah, that was going to hurt if anybody got fouled out. But this team seems less and less likely that just one guy is going to hurt you if they get into foul trouble. They don't know itself still perfectly. They don't know exactly what their starters are or what their identity is, but they are definitely a pretty well-rounded team. And the defense stepped up when it mattered the most. West Virginia shot 40% overall, 39 from three, which is solid, but Clemson forced them into a lot of empty possessions later on in the game. West Virginia didn't score a field goal until the final second of the game in the second half. They kind of had a drought there themselves. So Clemson's late game defense, to me, is what made it possible for guys like Welling to get that signature win or have that key dominating moment at the end. I'll be honest with you, Clemson still has a few problems that I don't like. They settled for some threes that were just not good decisions, and were really early on in the shot clock. So I wrote that down as a bullet point that I wanted to bring up that I didn't like. There's still those scoring drought problems that I think if they don't figure it out is going to be a big problem in conference play. Some of the transition buckets that they allowed just seem like they were on their back foot or just not really playing well defensively in transition. There were some, boneheaded turnovers. It wasn't a perfect game at all. I can't say that the team has been able to dominate an entire half, so far in the games that I have seen. But the difference is that after halftime, Clemson seemed to solve a few things and figure out what they could do that would work. And that is growth with this team. And if you continue to do those things and squeak out tough grinded wins, then that's going to work well later on in the season. So Clemson has a backbone. Clemson has some guys that could step up more than just Welling. Clemson has guys like Godfrey who can also be leaders, and a bunch of guys who really can just stay calm in close games. So you're going to have more games like this, and that's what's going to get you to the postseason and beyond for sure. Hey, thank you so much for making Locked On Clemson your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out Locked On ACC with Kenton Gibbs and Alex Dono. They break down the most interesting conference in college sports, from the rivalries to the championships to every game in between. Find Locked On ACC on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. And as always, Tiger fans, we'll see you hopefully tomorrow at the military appreciation game, and we'll see you at the top of the hill.